The westward road seems easiest, therefore it must be shunned. It will be watched. Too often the elves have fled that way. Now at this last we must take a hard road, a road unforeseen. There lies our hope, if hope it be, to walk into peril, to Mordor. We must send the ring to the fire.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. My name's Logan.
And I am Zach.
Today we're reading Book 2, Chapter 2 of the Fellowship of the Ring, the Council of Elrond.
We're here, baby.
And it's a beast. It's a beast of a chapter.
Oh man. Yeah, I was telling you earlier, I feel like the Council of Elrond is a little bit of a litmus test of if you can get through the Council of Elrond, then the Lord of the Rings is right for you. But if you get stuck here, as many people do, I think it's a sign that you're going to have trouble the rest of the book. Do you think it's the most difficult chapter of the entire book?
I think it's not the most difficult for me, but I think there's a lot happening. I mean, it sets up sort of not just the rest of Fellowship of the Ring, but the rest of the book. We get all the characters who we come to know. We get sort of descriptions of the conflict the multiple sort of sites of conflict that will happen throughout the rest of Lord of the Rings. And so I think because of how newsy it is, there's a lot of news, there's a lot of lore, history, background, and characters who are introduced. For that reason, it can be overwhelming. And I do think it's a place to decide, like, am I going to continue with this or not? Because if I'm not interested in some of this stuff, then like you're not going to become more interested, I don't think.
No.
As it goes,
in this chapter, we get introduced to so many things that we kind of just have just rattling around in the back of our brains about Lord of the Rings. Like everything from like the personalities of characters to deep lore stuff that all of us just kind of have as little factoids about Lord of the Rings. We get really kind of fleshed out in this chapter.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of the what ifs that people lob at Lord of the Rings, or like the why didn't they just do this or why didn't they just do that, gets addressed like pretty overtly in this chapter.
Yeah, why didn't they just drop it in the ocean? Why didn't they just destroy it? Why didn't they just
hide it in the Shire? Why didn't they just
or give it to Tom Bombadil or
why didn't they sail it over to Valinor?
Yeah, right. Leave it with the Valar. And then the sort of OG why didn't they just fly with an eagle is also addressed in here in sort of a subtle way, but in a single line. And which we'll get to, I think, as we are talking today. But yeah, all of that is part of the, I think, structure of the chapter, which begins pretty broad. We're like introduced, it's a council. We're introduced to, all these people who we either know or don't know, and then it just narrows and narrows and narrows as we get the news about what's going on in the world and what has brought everybody to this place. It all starts to narrow in on sort of the final decision of like what's possible and then what should be done and who should do it. It's kind of inexorable, I think. And so if you're into that and you're interested in what's going to happen next, I really do think it just flows along to a single point. Which is really pleasurable, I think, as a reading experience. But if you get lost in the names and the details and you're like, I'm not that interested in this, then I can see kind of bouncing off of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like an academic exercise of like, all right, in this world that I've created, what are the possibilities for what could be done about this ring?
Yeah.
And he lays out like you said, it's like a funnel. You start out with like a lot of possibilities,
Yeah.
and then one by one they kind of get taken away
Right.
as a possibility until there's really only one action that can be done and one person who can do it.
Yeah.
And it's really masterful, I think.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. We get a lot of the logic about the way the world works. We get all the powers laid out. We get, the political situation. We get introduced to, who is Gondor? Who are who is Rohan? Like, like all
Yeah.
these different people who are all actors in the world who might have some say or ability to oppose Sauron. Um, and it all, I think it shows how well it all hangs together in this chapter.
Yeah.
Because there's a ton of considerations that the characters are making in the chapter, but it's also considerations that you can sort of see through it to the considerations Tolkien was making about how might
Yeah.
this story go. And yeah, if you're like a nerd, it's the best. I think it's great,
Yeah.
if you like fiction, yeah, and you like systems and you like politics and you like, theology and all philosophy and everything. I think it's lovely, and it's a great place. It's a great place for the book to start, frankly, on page 233.
200, 250 or whatever it is in your edition.
but but I love that we get so much, rich characterization of the hobbits and who they are, because as we've talked about, they're these stand-ins for us, and we get to know. I think we sort of like come into the Council of Elrond with a perspective on the world,
Yeah.
and then, which is kind of small, and
Yeah.
then that perspective, it's like it zooms out, from like the perspective of the hobbits to like the perspective of the whole world.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, like there's a lot more going on than I knew.
Right.
Yeah, very, very fun.
I feel like we get an insight into Tolkien's mind and the sort of insane attention to detail that he brought to this story. Um, there really is not a single loose end at the end. There are questions that are unanswered or unanswerable,
Mm-hmm.
but you can guarantee that there's not a single question that you could come up with that Tolkien didn't wrestle with at length, and that he didn't work out all the possibilities of the ends that would come from certain decisions being made.
Yeah.
And I think this chapter is a perfect example of that. Um, uh, he referred to himself one time as a what do you call himself? Something like a fastidious bloke, or like a really detail oriented bloke.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's true. Like he knew that it was a strange way of being in the world, but he kind of leans into it in this chapter, I think.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about that in the Tom Bombadil uh, chapter, and it becomes really evident here, I think,
Yeah.
as well, how
Yeah.
much he has thought through these things. There aren't really any gotchas for Tolkien, you know?
And people try, people try, and they'll be like, why didn't they just take the Eagles?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I considered that, and let me let you know why.
Right.
And that's why his letters, I think, are such an interesting read, because you get to see that if there's a question, he had considered the answer to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting insight into the mind of Tolkien. Not only did he think through all the possibilities of like character motivations, what stakes were at play for every situation, every decision needing to be made, but he was also doing math about the moon, and he was doing
Right.
math about elf sex and propagation.
Yeah.
So all that attention to detail really, I think, finds its point at the
Yeah.
Council of Elrond. So what happens exactly? Like, let's just kind of lay it out. Frodo has just woken up from his coma after his encounter with the Nazgul. We know that Gandalf is safe and Gandalf is back on the scene, and we also know that other peoples from other parts of the world are sort of finding their way to Rivendell. Like, we were introduced to Glowin, Gimli's dad. We know that Elrond's sons are like out and about looking at things. We know that people are just kind of finding their way in. And so Elrond has called a council. And the ultimate question that they have is to determine, what are we going to do with the ring? Mm-hmm. So first they just establish like the state of the world right now. Like, what is going on politically in all of Middle Earth? Like, what is going on with the dwarves? Mm-hmm. What is going on with the elves? What is going on with men in the south and Gondor? The fact that the ring has been discovered is presented. A bunch of proofs are given for how do we know that this is the ring?
Yeah.
Capital T, capital R.
That it is what Gandalf says it is, essentially. We're kind of relying on his analysis.
Yes. So those proofs are provided. And then the ultimate question is, once we have determined, yes, this is the ring, what do we do with it?
Yeah, so what we get is Frodo waking up from the night before. He's had this reunion with Bilbo and a meal and experienced some of the sort of magic of, elven music and storytelling.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up and finds Bilbo again. And it's not long after he awakes that they're called to the council.
He says, "Hello, good morning. Yeah. Feel ready for the great council." This is all just fun and games for Bilbo at this point.
Yeah, Bilbo's just chill. This is kind of his second home now,
Yeah. He's like, "What's up, man? You ready for a council?"
I feel ready for anything, answered Frodo.
Welcome to Rivendell. This kind of thing happens all the time here. Make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, it's just part of the deal when you're living at Rivendell, I guess. And Sam, I love, just trots along with them.
Yeah.
And then we don't hear about Sam until the very end of the chapter
with his very inappropriate outburst.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it says he follows along behind them uninvited and for the moment forgotten.
It's almost like Tolkien is telling us to forget about Sam there.
Yeah.
So he can pull his little trick at the end.
So let's just kind of break down like who is listed as being there. There's Elrond.
Yeah.
Glorfindel. Glowin. Strider, who's back in his like Strider clothes. He's he's dressed like he's ready for going on a journey. Sam is there, but he's not supposed to. Sitting next to Glowin, we have Gimli, his son. Mm-hmm. We have some people from Elrond's household, Eristor, Galdor, who comes from the Grey Havens. And then we get an elf clad in green, who you might know as Orlando Bloom himself, Legolas.
Yep.
Sent over from Thranduil. And then finally we have Boromir, a man from the south who looks a lot like Aragorn, but he's dressed in finer clothes. He looks a little bit more like what you might expect Aragorn to look like, knowing his lineage.
He's got a great horn tipped with silver laid upon his knees, which is an interesting detail.
And a single white stone on his collar of silver. So he's got like some like cool bling.
Yeah, he's looking good, even though he's been sort of in the wild on his own for, it says 110 days later in the chapter.
Holy mackerel.
He brought his council wear, his council fit.
He's his drip.
Yeah. So he looks, I guess, so he looks good. He wants to show up as you know, not a prince exactly, but I kind of think that's what he's going for. And then we get to hear about what's been going on. As you were saying, we hear from Glowin about the dwarves, about Khazad-dûm, Moria, and what's been going on in Dale as well.
It's interesting, I think, because this is almost like filling the reader in on what's happened since The Hobbit. Like, I feel like this little aside, like, Glowin is one of the characters in The Hobbit, and so it's a nice way of just being like, hey, let's check in with our buds from the first book, kind of see what's happened with them. But I do think it would be helpful, like, as we're going along, to just kind of identify the speaker, because it seems like it's like kind of set up where it's like, and this person speaks, and then this person speaks, and then this person speaks.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like, Glowin is like kind of the first speaker of the day. And he gives a breakdown of, like, after all the events that happened in The Hobbit, you have some dwarves who break off and go and try to recolonize Moria. We're not sure at this point what happened to them. A little hint, it didn't go very good.
Mm-hmm. We're told that happens 30 years before the meeting.
Yeah, and that there's been a long period of not hearing back from them.
Yeah.
But then we get this chilling story about this messenger from Mordor, and I think that's the part that is really the most important to the council, where you have a messenger who comes to Dane, who's the king under the mountain, and he is asking for a ring, which was stolen from the Dark Lord Sauron. A small token of friendship that Sauron asks. This little ring, the least of rings that once he stole. So that's obviously referring to Bilbo. And think about, like, I guess what we get introduced to here. One, it's like, all right, Mordor is back, Sauron is back, and he's back enough that he's sending out messengers to the Lonely Mountain asking for rings.
Mm-hmm. I love the detail that it says that it's just a trifle that Sauron fancies.
Yeah.
And an earnest of your goodwill. And then he promises to give the 3 rings that the dwarf sires possessed of old return to the dwarfs.
Yeah.
To be yours forever, or the realm of Moria shall be yours forever. So there's these huge promises in return for this ring that kind of, supposedly means next to nothing. It's just a trifle, but yeah, I'd really like to have it back.
Yeah, it's not really a big deal, but if you can give me back this, then I'll give you this thing that you wanted forever.
The whole world,
Yeah.
like the whole dwarf world, I'll return to you. So I think that those things being kind of out of balance, immediately shows that it's a lie.
Yeah. And the fact that he promises Moria shows that he's, like, somehow in control of Moria, that he has it. The fact that he has it to give to them, or implies that he has it to give to them,
right,
should definitely cause pause.
And Dane, the king is wiser than, or I guess his wisdom is up to the challenge here, because he says, I'll have to think about it.
I say neither yay or nay.
Yeah. The time of my thought is my own to spend. And then this messenger says, for the present.
Yeah. For now.
Like, even the thought of your heart, like, Sauron wants to possess,
It's like, yeah. Your time is yours for now, but only for now.
Right. And
he says, and so I have been sent at last by Dane to warn Bilbo that he is sought by the enemy, and so to learn, if may be, why he desires this ring, this least of rings. So we get this kind of chilling account that Glowin is sent to report to Elrond and to get the advice of the elves. And Elrond says, you have done well to come. You will hear today all that you need in order to understand the purposes of the enemy. You will learn that your trouble is but part of the trouble of all the Western world. The ring. What shall we do with the ring? The least of rings, the trifle that Sauron fancies. This is the doom that we must deem. It's an interesting construction, the idea of doom. We have kind of a negative association with the term doom, like, we're doomed.
Mm-hmm.
But doom really just means like fate.
Mm-hmm.
Your doom is that which is deemed for
Right.
you by powers that are greater than you. And so this construction, this sentence, that is the doom that we must deem. I feel like that's kind of like a summary of the entire chapter, really.
Yeah, exactly.
What they're doing is trying to assess, like, what is our doom? What have we had set upon us by powers outside of our control?
Right.
And our purpose here is to deem what our fate is, to deem that which we have been given, to deem our doom. And the word doom pops up in this chapter again and again and again.
Yeah, it does. And, Elrond says, he talks about calling. He says, this is the purpose for which you have been called hither,
Yeah.
called here to Rivendell. And he says, called, I say, though I've not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You've come here and are met in the nick of time. By chance it may seem, yet it is not so. It's not chance. It's not just
Yeah.
it's not just an accident that they all come together at this time and place, but he says, believe rather that it's so ordered that we who sit here and none others must now find counsel for the peril of the world. So that really sets it in stark, it sets it starkly that what we're talking about is the fate of the world. And the fate of the world hinges on the tale of the ring.
Yeah. So Elrond, he basically gives like an entire history of the Second Age. Do you want to just like summarize that?
I don't know if I can.
I think if I start summarizing it, I'll just start bloviating for the next 45 minutes. So yeah, here's a little pop quiz. Don't look at your text. How would you describe it to someone who had never heard it before?
I don't think I can keep the all the names straight if I don't look at my text, but
It's probably for the best, because sometimes the names just get confusing.
so there was a war between Sauron
Yeah.
and the forces of Mordor and the last alliance of elves and men. So descendants from Numenor
Yep.
and Elrond and his kin, essentially.
Yeah.
So we have the king of Numenor, who is
Well, not the king of Numenor. Not quite the king of Numenor. The king who came from Numenor, I guess.
oh right, the king who came from Numenor. Yeah, Elendil, is that right?
Elendil the Tall and his mighty sons Isildur and Anurion.
They become lords in Middle Earth, and so they have forces to battle with Sauron, and
Right.
they ally themselves, or the elves and these men ally themselves against Sauron. They go to war. It's a big war, and
Yeah.
and everybody dies. Elendil dies. Anarion dies. Is an elf king killed in this or not?
An elf king is killed. Gil-galad,
Gil-galad gets killed.
the high king of the elves.
So who's left? Is Elrond, essentially, is Elrond and Isildur. Isildur.
And Círdan the shipwright is also there.
Oh, and Círdan the shipwright, who we hear about a little bit earlier in the chapter, that we have a emissary or whatever from him.
And then, like, at the very, very end of the story, we get to see Círdan again.
Yeah, and Isildur, well, Sauron is killed. Well, Sauron is defeated in his...
he's thrown down.
In his physical form, yeah. And Isildur cuts the ring from his finger and takes it as a weregild. We talked about that.
Weregild. Great word.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And actually, that's here in this chapter. This I have as weregild for my father and my brother, he said.
Do you want to talk
And
about Weregild again, like a little bit, just in case someone didn't hear
it's like
us
it's like
break it down again?
it's like a man price, right? It's
Man
like a
price, man price,
um
exactly. Weregild.
I think you said it's like a almost like a life insurance policy or something like that. Like
Exactly. So it
um
comes from, just really briefly, because I know we've talked about it in the past before. Um, but were is like man, so it's like the same thing. A
werewolf.
werewolf,
Yeah.
exactly. And a guild is a price, so it's like the price that a person would pay a family if they killed their son or husband in
Mm-hmm.
battle. So it's like uh, and when he says, "I take this as a weregild from my father and my brother," he's basically saying like, "Hey, this very precious thing that Sauron made. Everything else that Sauron made is ugly and terrible and evil, but this thing is beautiful and precious, and so I'm going to take it, and it's mine." And
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because it sets it up that, and Frodo even says as much. He says, "Well, then it's not mine. It's yours, Aragorn,
Right.
because you're the heir of Elendil,
Right.
and Isildur claimed the ring as weregild. So there's kind of a recognition that if anybody in the council were to have a claim to the ring, it would be Aragorn.
Right.
And I think we should take it as true that not only would Aragorn have a like legitimate claim to the ring, but he also has the spiritual strength to wield it if he chooses to.
Yeah.
So him choosing not to wield it is a bigger deal, I think, than maybe most people would recognize. Like Aragorn, I think could put the ring on his finger and march down to Mordor and defeat Sauron if he wanted to.
Sure. But he would become the next Dark Lord in the line of Dark Lords.
Right. And he may not even do anything like overtly evil
Mm-hmm.
with the ring. He may be a benevolent king. But by using this evil means to arrive at an ultimately good end, that itself would make him ignoble. It would make him a dark lord, in a different way. Even if he wasn't like Sauron overtly, like hacking and slashing and burning, it would eventually work on his heart. Like he would be a benevolent dictator, but he'd still be a dictator.
Yeah, the power the ring grants is corrupting in and of itself
Yeah.
because the way it, even if you wield it for good, the way it, I think it's instructive that Boromir talks about having the power of command.
Yeah.
Um, that power of command is so strong from the ring that it, yeah, like interrupts people's free will in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, there may be, this is probably outside the scope of this chapter, but we also talk about Bombadil having the power of command,
Yeah.
but
But not ownership.
not ownership. And so the power of command that the ring kind of grants is a power of ownership. It's a
It's
enthralling.
control. It's
Yeah,
control.
right. It's
It's
control.
it's
It's
yeah.
it enslaves. Like it's it's not a it's not sort of bent toward freedom. It's something that is always bent toward making one's own will the only will that really matters in the world. Um,
Right.
for the person who wields it. I think it's fascinating that as Elrond is talking about this history, all of these great princes were assembled, and the elves deemed that the evil was ended forever, but it was not so.
Yeah.
And then he says, I've seen 3 ages in the west of the world, and many defeats and many fruitless victories.
Yeah.
So all the victories that Elrond has been a part of have still led to this place
Yeah.
where we still are contending with either Morgoth or Sauron.
Yeah, it's like the myth of the war to end all war.
Yeah, the discord is still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, within this story, Isildur taking the ring and not destroying it leads
Yeah.
to the place where they are
Yeah.
today. Isildur doesn't listen to the Council of Círdan and Elrond.
Yeah.
And as we said, he takes it as a were guild, but of course it almost immediately betrays him.
Yeah. Yeah. Betrays him to his death.
To his death, and I think Aragorn knows this story as well as anybody, and so that's in part why he doesn't take it.
Yeah.
He sort of has always been told this ring betrayed your forefather. Elrond again says, "Fruitless did I call the victory of the last alliance? Not wholly so. Yet it did not achieve its end. Sauron was diminished but not destroyed. His ring was lost but not unmade. The Dark Tower was broken, and its foundations were not removed. For they were made with the power of the ring, and while it remains, they will endure." So we get these opposing verbs that things can be mended but not come to an end. That things can become better for a time, but this other power lays in wait. And then I think we get what I think of as a description of the long decline.
Yeah, of human beings. Yeah.
Of human beings and the kind of beauty of these cities that they had set up with an intention of keeping watch over Mordor.
Yeah.
But we hear that the watch upon the walls of Mordor slept.
Yeah.
We hear about, and there's a changing in names, right? Like the chief city was Osgiliath, the Citadel of Stars.
Yeah.
And there's a whole description. We go from the Tower of the Moon, Sun, and Stars, these different towers and cities, the Moon, Sun, and Stars, to sorcery and guard. So the stars are like deserted completely.
Mm-hmm.
Which, the way that stars play a role with their symbolism in Tolkien is such that I think that's intentional, that the Citadel of Stars becomes a city of guard rather than kind of keeping our eye on things that are eternal. We start to turn toward things that are just functional.
I like how he says the race of Numenor has decayed.
Yeah.
And the span of their years has lessened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a theme in all of Tolkien that I feel like people maybe scratch their head at a little bit, which is why is there this theme of decay? I mean, the obvious one that people always ask about is why are the elves diminishing? What is it about the elves? But you also see it here in men, where they start as this proud, long-lived race, and the remnant that we have left over is much less in power and dignity and majesty. But I think for Tolkien, he had this this theological understanding of the world as not being this progressive climb towards greatness or perfection, but that things started out according to God's plan, and then because of sin, they diminish and decay.
Yeah,
and it's present in all of Tolkien's legendarium. It's not a progressive way of seeing the world. It's a world in decline, a world in decay. But also, I mean, like, that's just it tracks for me. Like, I was thinking about it. It tracks with like how the world works. Like, if you're living in a place where people have lived for a really long time, they build shining towers, and then the sands of time wear those towers down, and eventually what's left is just ruins and rubble, whether it's the Barrow Downs or Minas Morgul, which is taken over by evil. Whether it's the road that the hobbits take out of Hobbiton that used to be this splendid work of people with knowledge beyond what the hobbits have to build or to create. Like what you're left with is like the ruins of people who were smarter and stronger and more capable. And maybe it's just because my back hurts right now that I'm thinking like, yeah. And like, as you move through life, like entropy is just a fact of life. Like
your body starts to betray you, you know?
Yeah. It's just a different way of seeing the world, I think, than what a lot of us have. But yeah, I mean, you have the triumph of the last alliance, even though it comes at great cost. Like the High King of the Elves dies, the King of Men, who was this shining example of leadership from the West, dies. His son dies, and all that's left is Isildur, who, in what I think is ultimately a very understandable decision, makes that victory fruitless because he doesn't end evil for good in the chance that he has, but instead he chooses to take it. And you know, just to kind of like wrap up the history side of this story and kind of like wrap up the story of the Second Age, you know, the rings of power are forged with the help of Sauron. The three that the elves have were never touched by Sauron, but there's still the understanding that if Sauron has the ring, the One Ring, that the elven rings aren't safe to use.
Yeah.
The rings are forged. 9 go to men who are enslaved by Sauron. 7 go to the dwarves, who use it for wealth, hoarded wealth, especially in Moria. And the 3 are accounted for. So they kind of use it as a proof for like this has to be the One Ring, because they're like, you know, we can account for the 9. The 9 are with the Nazgul. We know where the 3 are. The 7 were either lost or destroyed. So the only one that's left has to be this master ring.
Yeah, it says that the 3, well, because Isildur, at the same time that he dies, he loses the ring, or he loses the ring and then dies.
Right.
It passed out of knowledge, and the 3 were released from its dominion.
Right.
I'm not really clear on how that dominion works, except that this ring is greater than any other ring. We just know that. But they're in peril once more because the One Ring has been found.
Yeah.
Not that the One Ring now has power over the 3, but they're in peril because the One Ring there's a chance that it would find its way back to Sauron. And that's the end of the kind of history of the ring, the history lesson that Elrond gives us. And then immediately Boromir has to stand up and speak on behalf of how great a job Gondor is doing, and you know, first it's first to say more of Gondor, for verily from the land of Gondor I am come. And they do feel, you know, he lets us know that
the blood of Numenor is not spent, my guys.
Well, the blood of Numenor is not spent, but we're up against it. A power there was that we have not felt before. And there's even some fear. We get this detail about a dark shadow under the moon. Do we take that to be one of the...
I think it's almost certainly the Witch King of Angmar.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. But it's a pretty mysterious what this power was. But it has an effect upon the people who are defending Gondor, because they feel this fear.
Yeah.
And there was a madness that filled the foes. So the combination of sort of like a madness amongst the orcs that they're fighting, and then this great fear that enters the heart of men as they're trying to defend the borders of Gondor at Osgiliath. It means
You
that
can
they
hear
lose.
the pride in Boromir's voice, and it's not a pride necessarily that's prideful. Like he is proud of his heritage. He's proud of his city. And he recognizes, I think, that there's a reason why Sauron hasn't just overtaken the world again, and that reason is due in part, at least, to Gondor.
Right.
And he says, "By our valor, the wild folk of the east are still restrained, and the terror of Morgul kept at bay. And thus alone are peace and freedom maintained in the lands behind us, bulwark of the west." But we know that's not 100% true. I mean, because as Aragorn points out later, hey, you're not the only ones who are working to prevent evil from taking over, without the Rangers in the north, who are also the heirs of this, this line of Westerness. Then the evil would take over the world too. And he's like, I'm called Strider by a fat man in Bree, whose heart would fail if he knew what was just at his doors. And so he kind of puts Boromir in his place. He's like, it's not all Gondor, but Gondor does play a role. It serves as a gate that prevents evil things from entering into the rest of the world.
And I think it focuses Sauron's attention in some way.
Yeah.
Even in the Return of the King, Sauron's attention is focused toward his gate, where forces from Gondor and Rohan have gathered. And so that opposing power being there means that tactically Sauron has to pay attention. He can't just send his forces into the world to try to find the ring, for instance. He can only send kind of messengers.
Right.
And the Nazgul, whose power diminishes the further they get from Mordor and that kind of thing. And so Boromir isn't wrong. It's not like Gondor's doing nothing. And he should be. I think that there is a certain amount of pride there that is earned. There's certainly a role that Gondor plays, and it becomes more and more important as the book goes on.
I think Boromir's personality is really held in contrast to Aragorn's personality. Boromir has pridefulness. Aragorn has humility.
Right.
Boromir is the son of the steward, but he's not the king.
Right.
But still, even this imperfect person who relies too much on physical strength as opposed to like a more spiritual strength, like what Aragorn has or Gandalf has or Elrond has, the strength that comes from long study and from wisdom
and practice.
Yeah. His strength comes from the sword and the strength of your arm, and quick action as opposed to deliberate action. Even he is used by the Valar to bring about an end. He's a necessary piece of the puzzle. Gondor is a necessary piece of the puzzle, despite their weaknesses. Boromir and his brother Faramir, who we'll meet much, much later, are given a dream. And I think we have to assume that these come from the powers. These come from the Valar themselves. Do you want to talk about the dream?
Yeah, I think so. I think it makes sense that the dreams come from the Valar. He tells us, I think it's interesting that he doesn't come in force. He comes on his own.
Yeah.
110 days. I've journeyed all alone. And he's not even there to seek allies. He just says, I need wisdom and I need somebody to interpret this dream.
Yeah.
And so Faramir has the dream, I think, multiple times. Boromir has it once.
Yeah.
And he says that, in a dream, I thought the eastern sky grew dark, and there was a growing thunder. But in the west, a pale light lingered, and out of it I heard a voice, remote but clear. So the west is where the Valar live.
Right.
And I think that's what this is referring to, this pale light. And I'll just read the poem.
Yeah.
Seek for the sword that was broken, in Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken stronger than Morgul spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand, for Isildur's banes shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand.
There's that word doom.
There's that word doom, yeah. And again, I think it means it's sort of like fate, like the turning of the wheel is inexorable, right? And
Right.
and I like the detail. It says that when Frodo walks into the council, Boromir sort of looked like can't believe it.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of this line, and the halfling forth shall stand.
Where was that? I don't remember that part.
It's right. It's when it says, it's describing Boromir. He was cloaked and booted as if for a journey on horseback. It talks about the single white stone, and then it describes his horn tipped with silver that was laid upon his knees. He gazed at Frodo and Bilbo with sudden wonder. So he's like, "Oh dang, there's a halfling, a hobbit."
Yeah, I wonder if that's this halfling thing that was in my dream. Yeah.
Yeah, no, things are coming together here, And Imladris, that is Rivendell.
Yes, the Elvish word for Rivendell. Yeah.
So he knows to go to Imladris, and he knows that maybe Isildur's Bane, the ring, will play into this, and that a halfling has something to do with it. So it's all kind of coming together for Boromir here. He's got to be thinking to himself, like, I'm in the right place, even though the way was full of doubt and danger. I took the journey upon myself, and I did my best to get here as soon as I could.
Yeah.
He doesn't even really know where Rivendell is.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, if you know where it lay, yeah, and I don't think he knows what Isildur's Bane means, because at one point when Elrond is giving the story of like what happened to Isildur, he's like, oh, if it was known in the South that Isildur had taken the ring, it's long been forgotten.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
And so he kind of has this like mystery of like, what is Isildur's Bane? So here is where Aragorn is really like standing up and being like, all right, it'll be made clear to you now, like what this poem means. And really the fact that Aragorn exists at all and his lineage is then revealed to Boromir because of this sword that he has.
Boromir kind of can't recognize him yet.
No.
Even though Aragorn says, here's the sword that is broken. Boromir says, what do you have to do with Minas Tirith? He just sees this, this scruffy
raggedy
strider.
Yeah.
And Elrond is the one who names him and says, he is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and he's descended through many fathers from Isildur, Elendil's son of Minas Ithil. He's chief of the Dunedain of the North, and there are few left of that folk. And that's when Frodo says, oh, he puts it together. God. He's like, it's yours. Here, take it,
He says it does not belong to either of us, said Aragorn. It has been ordained that you should hold it for a while.
And then all eyes are on Frodo.
Behold Isildur's Bane, says Elrond. Frodo comes and brings up the ring. Says, hold it up, and then Boromir will understand the remainder of this riddle.
He doesn't understand it. His eyes glinted as he all immediately feels sort of ring lust.
Yeah.
When he sees it, but he still doesn't understand why should we seek a broken sword.
But Boromir, he misunderstands the end of the riddle, the end of the vision. He says, the halfling is then the doom of Minas Tirith come at last, but why then should we seek a broken sword?
Right. And Aragorn says, the words were not the doom of Minas Tirith, but doom and great deeds are indeed at hand. And the sword that was broken is the sword of Elendil that broke beneath him when he fell. And then he tells us that it's been handed down through the generations, even when all other heirlooms were lost.
Yeah.
And
he says, "For it was spoken of old among us that it should be made again when the ring, Isildur's bane, was found." So that's something I don't know if I ever really fully appreciated, which is that Aragorn's family has held the bits of this broken sword for a couple thousand years.
Yeah.
And they said, when the ring is found again, we'll reforge the sword. So they're waiting. Like, I guess it's kind of been a question in my mind, just like, why didn't they just reforge the sword before? And it's like they were waiting for this exact moment when the ring was found again. But I do think it's interesting, Boromir, he misunderstands doom, like what the word doom means. So this is definitely like a play on words, like Tolkien, the philologist, Tolkien, the linguist, is kind of making a word play here. It says in the vision, there shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand. So Boromir reads that as there's going to be a token that's shown that will show that the end of the world is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And Aragorn corrects him and says, it's not the doom of Minas Tirith. It's with a lowercase d, doom, but instead it's doom with an uppercase d, which is that fate is near at hand. That everyone here has been chosen to be here for this exact moment. The powers have seen it so that people are given signs and signals and warnings to be here at this council at this moment. And the world is going to turn on this moment in history.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fate, the doom that has been placed on all of them.
Yeah. And, Boromir, he always is sort of hedging, I think, in the chapter.
Yeah.
Because he wants to keep saying, like, I just came to get a riddle solved.
Yeah. I didn't come for military help. I didn't come for any magic weapons.
Yeah, I'm not here for the ring. I'm not here for the magic weapons. I'm just here, it's even beyond our hope to imagine that, a weapon is like as legendary as this sword. It could be reforged.
From the shadows of the past, he says.
Yeah, from the shadows of the past, exactly. But he looks at Aragorn and he has this doubt in his eyes.
Yeah.
And Bilbo's like, come on.
It's like, hey, I'm going to stand up for my friend right now.
Yeah. And Bilbo's kind of a step ahead of everybody.
Bilbo's like, hey, that's my friend. All right, you want to pick a fight? You pick a fight with me before you pick a fight with him.
Right.
It's like, now I'm going to throw down. I got bars. And I'm going to drop these bars.
It's time for a rap battle.
Rap battle at the Council of Elrond. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. Can you just imagine? It's so awkward. It's like this is like little.
Yeah, he bursts out.
Yeah, he's getting a little hot.
He just can't contain him. He just can't contain himself. And he says, not very good, perhaps, but to the point. If you need more beyond the words of Elrond. He said, if that was worth a journey of 110 days to hear, you best listen to it. I made that up. I made that up myself, he whispered to Frodo.
Yeah. I love that little aside to Frodo. He's like, hey, guess who wrote that?
Me.
It was me.
And Aragorn and Bilbo are buddies, man. I mean, Aragorn smiles at him.
Yeah.
And then they just keep giving it to Boromir. He's like, look, I know that I don't resemble the kings who you are imagining. The kings who
are carven in your halls.
In the halls where Denethor your father sits, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Denethor, we come to find out, kind of imagines himself as a king. I think Boromir certainly imagines himself as a prince.
Yeah.
And he's like, look, I'm not a Isildur. I'm just an heir of a Isildur. And I've had this hard life. but I'm the guy. Like I am the guy, and you just need to. He sort of is like, you need to accept it, and you need to accept, as you said before, like we've been out here in the world doing things to keep the world safe. Also,
Yeah. We've been guarding the world ceaselessly.
yeah, and by the way, we don't have walls to hide behind either. Although Boromir feels that, you know, his people are not kind of being given their
due.
Their due. Aragorn's like, not only are we not given our due, people hate us, right?
Yeah,
and are afraid of us. And what they should be afraid of is the things that we actually keep at bay.
Yeah. While you're sitting in the halls of Denethor, sipping from goblets, you know, behind your white walls, we're out here without any thanks.
Right.
Like, yeah, you have less thanks than you would like.
Right.
We have no thanks at all.
None. Right.
To the point where
the opposite.
Nobody even knows who we really are. Like,
right.
People know that you're the steward of Gondor.
Right.
That your father's the steward of Gondor.
Yeah.
And you get all types of privileges because of that. Nobody even knows my proper name. Like, I'm called Strider.
I'm called Strider by a fat man in Bree. And you know, when you walk down the street in Minas Tirith, people stand aside, right?
Yeah.
But Aragorn, this is Aragorn's declaration. That's how I have it described in my notes here. But now the world is changing once again. A new hour comes. Isildur's bane is found. Battle is at hand. The sword shall be reforged, and I will come to Minas Tirith. Like, I'm on my way, and I'm the king. So, you know, so like, there's like the hope that you were hoping for, Boromir, for your people, is coming from the north, not from, you know, not from within the walls of Gondor. And then there is a question here, right? Like, well, how do we know?
Yeah,
that the ring is what that the ring is what you say it is.
And here's where we get the proofs.
Right.
Before we move on, and I might cut this out. There's a really weird sentence in here that I'd like to read. He says, "I am but the heir of Isildur, not Isildur himself. I have had a hard life and a long, and the leagues that lie between here and Gondor are a small part of the count of my journeys." That's just a weird thing to say. I have had a hard life and a long. Isn't that a weird construction?
Yeah, that is strange. A hard life and a long life. A hard and long life.
Yeah.
But not a hard life and a long.
Isn't that a weird way of saying it?
It's strange.
It might be that Tolkien just like to kind of push grammatical conventions that are not rules. So, like, when he was little, he said that his study of language was really rooted in the fact that he wrote a story about a green dragon. And when he wrote his story, he said that it was a green great dragon.
Not a great green dragon. Yeah.
And his mom corrected it. And she's like, "This is a great story, honey, but it needs to be a great green dragon." And he said, "Why?" And she didn't have a good answer for him.
Yeah.
And so he's like, "I wanted to write that it was a green great dragon, not a great green dragon." Mm-hmm. So I wonder if it maybe has something to do with that. Like, I have had a hard life and a long, like we would write that I've had a hard, long life, or I've had a hard and long life.
Do you know the rules around adjective order in English? So there actually is a rule that everyone knows who's a fluent English speaker. But no one can actually I mean, it can be described, but hardly anyone can actually describe it. Adjectives in English generally follow a specific order when describing a noun: opinion, size, age, shape, color, origin, material, and purpose. It's not a strict rule, but it's a common pattern that native English speakers naturally follow. So if you were to describe a noun with all of those, with that order out of order, you sound like a moron. I mean, you sound like an idiot. So, for instance,
or we should say a non-native speaker, like not necessarily an idiot.
Well, right, but it's a beautiful long. For example, it is a beautiful long new dress, or she has bought a square white Japanese cake. when you use more than one adjective, you have to put them in the right order. So opinion is like, so, it was a good, big, flat, young, red, French, wooden writing implement.
Yeah.
But if you get that wrong, it's
a signal that you're not a native speaker.
Exactly. And so that's what Tolkien's mom knew.
Yeah.
A lovely big old round red Italian wooden table.
Yeah.
But if you
a great green dragon.
But if you say a lovely old round Italian lovely red wooden table, it's like that is, you're like,
yeah.
Hold on a second. It's what? But anyway, so
yeah, so all that to say,
we'll probably cut that out, but it's
I
fascinating.
have had a hard life and a long is just a weird a weird sentence that I've always been like, but
yeah.
But I guess it's not technically grammatically incorrect. It's just a strange way of saying it.
Yeah, it is.
Instead of I've had a hard long life.
So again, Aragorn's declaration is, but now the world is changing once again. A new hour comes. Isildur's bane is found. Battle is at hand. The sword shall be reforged. I will come to Minas Tirith.
And Boromir is like, Isildur's bane is found, you say. I've seen a bright ring in the halfling's hand. But Isildur perished ere this age of the world began. How do the wise know that this ring is his? And how is it passed down the years until it is brought hither by so strange a messenger? And Elrond is like, that shall be told. But Bilbo is like, good Lord, it's time. It's time
but
for
not
a break.
yet, I beg, master. Already the sun is climbing to noon, and I feel a little peckish.
I feel the need of something to strengthen me.
And so hobbitry, right? Essentially.
So that's Bilbo's time to chime in. He's like, we already had Bilbo drop some bars, but now Elrond is like, hey, now's the time for you to tell your part of the tale.
Mm-hmm.
And the briefer you tell your story and the plainer that you tell it, the sooner you'll be refreshed. Right. And he's like, I beg you to tell us a story. If you haven't already cast it into verse, you could just do it in prose and that would be fine.
Yeah, just tell us the story as simply as you can, please. Although we're told he did not omit a single riddle. What have I got in my pocket? And
Logan, this is a family podcast. Don't ask me what you have in your
pocket. Anyway, and then we find out how the ring comes to Frodo. Well, it's told, at least.
Bilbo is just so funny in this chapter. Like, he just stands up and, recites a little poem that he composed for his friend. Of course, I've written poems about you, Logan, but I'm not just like going to stand up and like read them in front of my friends. One thing that I think is so funny about Lord of the Rings, and this is just this is an aside, but whenever people recite poetry, they recite it perfectly from memory. Like, it doesn't say like, and then Bilbo pulled out a scroll where he'd written down. No, he has a committed to memory, ready to go. Boromir, he's like, and then I heard this poem, and he recites it perfectly. It just happens again and again.
I think in previous ages, actually not even that long ago, people could just recite poetry.
Yeah.
I think it was something that you did, and it was a sign that you were educated and well-mannered.
Yeah.
That you could just whip out some poetry on command.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore, but I can't remember my name most of the time unless I look on my phone.
Who are you?
Yeah. What's my name again? Logan.
Hi, my name is.
Hello. My name is what? Logan. Anyway.
Speaking of, he just recites, like, he recounts his entire life's journey since Gandalf scratched the rune on his door. Right. Even though he just complained that he was getting peckish. I do think it's interesting that he looks at Glowin And he says, I will now tell the true story. And if some here have heard me tell it otherwise, I ask them to forget it and to forgive me. I only wish to claim the treasure as my very own in those days, and to be rid of the name of thief that was put on me. So this is something that we've mentioned in the past, but in the original edition of The Hobbit, the riddle game with Gollum was very different. And you can find a sort of like an interlinear version of it online where you can see exactly what was added. But in brief, the original edition of The Hobbit, which was written in 1937, published in 1937, I should say, the riddle game stakes is that if Bilbo wins the riddle game, then Gollum would give him the ring. As Tolkien is writing Lord of the Rings, he realizes that the way that he's constructed the rules about the ring, Gollum would never willingly offer to give Bilbo the ring. Mm-hmm. And so he rewrites the Riddles in the Dark chapter. And the version of the Riddles in the Dark that any of us will have read was the second edition of The Hobbit, where the riddle game was amended. But for most of the people who are reading this book for the first time in 1954, you would have to assume that a huge chunk of them, their version of the story that they heard was that Gollum said, like, hey, if you win this riddle game, I'll give you the ring, and that will be your prize. And in the original version, Bilbo he stumbled on the ring, he put it in his pocket. So all of that is exactly the same. But Gollum, like, when he wins the riddle game, he can't guess what's in his pocket. Gollum, like, gets on his boat, goes to look for the ring, can't find it, comes back and is like, I'm really sorry. I was going to give you this present, but I can't find it. Maybe I could just like show you the way out as a way to like say sorry for all this. And Gollum is like really apologetic, takes him to the door and is like, hey, no hard feelings. I hope this is okay. I know it's not what I promised, but and then Bill was like, hey, see you later. And he's out. Mm-hmm. And in the world of the story, Bilbo told that version of events to Glowin and to Gandalf and to other people and wrote it down in his own book because he knew that he had cheated. Right. And he didn't want to be called a thief. So for a lot of people, when they're reading the Fellowship of the Ring for the first time, Tolkien has to kind of address the fact that there's another version of the story floating around out there. And the way that he does it, I think, is really brilliant. He just makes it part of the story where he's like, there's an alternative version of the story, which is rooted in Bilbo's own telling of the story that, in the Shadows of the Past chapter 2, Gandalf is like, hey, hate to burst your bubble, but Bilbo's version of the story is not exactly how it went down. And this is where that's really worked out again. It's like, hey, Bilbo basically lied to everyone.
Yeah, and he's a little embarrassed. I like that. He kind of the fact that he kind of glances at Glowin.
Yeah,
is funny. Frodo also tells his story.
Yeah,
and Bilbo's a little impressed by.
Not bad, he says.
The telling. There are whole chapters and stuff before he even got here. I can't wait to add it to his book.
He says, I tried to make a few good notes. We shall have to go over it again together sometime if I'm to write it up. There are whole chapters of stuff before you ever got here.
Sort of a self-justification for the pace of the story, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, didn't you guys want to know all this?
Like, come on, man.
I guess. Yeah.
And it's a nod to the fact that within the realm of the story, the book that we are reading is the collected notes of Frodo after the journey is done. So it's like you have The Hobbit, which is written by Bilbo. You have Lord of the Rings, which is written by Frodo and supplemented by Sam. So
then we get ring proofs.
We get the ring proofs. So here's how it starts. Galdor of the Havens, who was sent by Círdan the Shipwright. The only words that he really speaks in this council is to say, like, all right, I've heard a lot of conjecture, I've heard some really good stories this morning, but I'm kind of with Boromir on this one. Like, yeah, we see a ring here, but where's the proof? All right. Like spell it out for me. He says, the wise may have good reason to believe the halfling's trove isn't, great word, by the way, trove.
Yeah.
Like treasure trove, like
trove,
the thing that the Hobbit has. The wise may have good reason to believe the halfling's trove is indeed the great ring of long debate. Unlikely though that may seem to those who know less, speaking for himself, I believe. But may we not hear the proofs? And I would ask this also, what of Saruman? He is learned in the lore of the rings, yet he is not among us. What is his counsel if he knows these things that we have heard? So then Gandalf's part comes. It's Gandalf's time to speak. And he responds to Galdor. He says, some, Galdor, would think the tidings of Glóin and the pursuit of Frodo proof enough that the halfling's trove is a thing of great worth of the enemy. Yet it is a ring. What then? The 9 the Nazgul keep. The 7 are taken or destroyed. The 3 we know of. What then is the one that he desires so much?
Gandalf acknowledges that a lot of time has passed between the finding of the ring and then finally coming to terms with what it is.
Right.
And he owns his failure.
Yeah, he says partly the reason why he was kind of lulled into complacency was because he felt that Saruman...
He trusts Saruman.
Yeah, he had more knowledge about this. He was wise in ring lore. Gandalf says, some here will remember that many years ago, I myself dared to pass the doors of the necromancer in Dol Guldur and secretly explored his ways, and found thus that our fears were true. He was none other than Sauron, our enemy of old, at length taking shape and power again. And so they find out that he is like earnestly seeking after the ring of power again, but other members of the council, namely Sauron, who's supposed to know these things more, he says basically not to worry about it, right?
Yeah, he says not to worry about it. He says that Saruman knows that we don't have it, that it's still lost. Sauron thinks that it could still be found, but Saruman says his hope will cheat him. And Saruman has made it his mission to study this craft. He studies the craft of Sauron.
Right.
And he says that he's sure that it's rolled down to the river to the sea and it's gone. It's going to be there forever. So we don't have to worry too much about it. Right. Yes, Saruman is gathering the strength, but he's not going to find his old power again. And Gandalf trusts him.
Yeah.
Saruman is the head of Gandalf's order.
Yeah.
And he's going to take Saruman's lead, even though he continues to feel sort of nagged by the fact that this evil is growing in the world.
And he knows, like, all right, so Gollum has this ring, and it's clearly a great ring because it makes his life longer. He's like, all the other rings that we know about had jewels on them. So,
Gandalf can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah. He's like, I can't get this out of my mind.
Right. How did this little Gollum guy from Bilbo's story come to possess a great ring, or a ring of some kind of power? And so he can't stop thinking about it. He sets a watch for him, but he says, I let the matter rest. I was watching and waiting, as we too often have done. He says, I failed, to sort of pay attention to the things that kept coming up in my mind. And the events of the world continue to remind him that the ring is there. And that,
he says, whence came the hobbit's ring? Yeah. What if my fear was true? What should be done with it? Those things I must discard.
And for some reason, the Shire, which, is a backwater, it's not an important place.
No.
Becomes the focus of spies, he says.
Yeah.
Even beasts and birds are gathered around the Shire, and his fear continues to grow. And he starts to explore, or Aragorn tells us that he starts to explore because he's like, we should hunt for Gollum,
Yeah.
And starts to set that watch to hunt for Gollum. He's kind of ranging all over Middle Earth,
Right.
looking for signs of what's going on.
And he asks Aragorn to help him. He's like,
yeah,
Aragorn's like, yeah, Isildur failed, and so it's for the heir of Isildur to help set this right. And so he agrees to help Gandalf find Gollum. But in the meantime, Gandalf's like, all right, where do you go if you don't know the answer to something? You go to the library. Exactly. Right. He's like, all right, so the last person that we know had the ring was Isildur. So I'm going to go see if I could find any account of Isildur in Gondor. And he's like, I know that Saruman spent a long time in the scroll rooms of Gondor, and I know that he read a lot of those things. But he doesn't trust him quite. He's like, I'm not going to go to him and say like, hey, where do you think the ring is? He's like, I'm going to go straight to where he went. So he goes to Denethor and he asks, the Lord of the City if he could look in the place of his hoarded scrolls and books. And Denethor's response, I think, is really telling about his personality. Because if indeed you look only, as you say, for records of ancient days and the beginnings of the city, read on. So he kind of lies to Denethor and says like, hey, don't worry, I'm not looking for nothing spicy or juicy. I just want to know about, the history of Gondor, but the beginnings of the city, man. Like let me just do a little research. And he says, but unless you have more skill even than Sauron, who has studied here long, you will find naught that is not well known to me, who am master of the lore of the city. Which we know from earlier is absolutely not true, because Boromir didn't even know that Isildur had the ring at all. So Denethor's pridefulness is really showing here.
Yeah, definitely. Gandalf, he undertakes this research, and he does find a scroll that concerned the ring, and it was written by Isildur, that a great ring shall now go to be an heirloom. There's that, Weregild heirloom word again, of the North Kingdom. But the records will be left here, in case there's a time where the memory of these great matters shall grow dim.
Which is where we are.
Right, exactly. And he describes the ring, where it came from, but that when he took it, there was writing on it that burned like fire. And then here's some conjecture. Maybe if the gold was made hot again, the writing would be refreshed. But he's not going to risk any heart to this thing because it's the only fair thing that Sauron ever made.
Yeah, so he's like, when I found this thing, it had this writing on it, and now it's faded. But he seems to say like, I think it might come back with fire because Sauron's hand was hot. In fact, like when I touched it, it was hot as a glade, which I guess is like an ember from a fire.
Right.
And it hurt him when he held it such so that he thinks that he may never fully recover from that pain. Yeah, isn't that such an interesting image? Like the idea that he is wounded by the touching of this thing, but he still finds it so precious.
Yeah.
But he says like, cause Sauron's hand was black and yet burned like fire. And so Gil-galad was destroyed. Mm-hmm. So it seems like the way that Sauron killed Gil-galad is with his bare,
like burning
to
death.
Oh, so metal.
Pretty nasty.
That's hardcore.
And yet he still thinks it's this beautiful thing, and he says it's precious to me. There's that word, precious. Though I buy it with great pain.
And it seems like, the buying it, the saying like, I buy it with great pain. It's like, yeah, I mean, I got this thing because my father and my brother were killed right in front of me.
Right.
So it's bought with pain in that it came to him at a great cost, like the death of his father and his brother, but also the fact that he bears a wound that will never fully heal from handling this thing. It burned him, and he's never going to be fully healed from that pain. Yeah, so it's interesting. He's like the script might return if it was thrown in a fire, but there's no chance in hell that I'm going to throw it in the fire because it's too precious to me.
Gandalf goes north. Aragorn, steps in here and says, "I found Gollum, by the way, and I took him to Mirkwood."
Even though he's covered in green slime and he smells terrible and he bit
He
Aragorn.
stinks. And then Gandalf comes and questions him. Is there a implication that Gandalf tortures Gollum?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, so like in the second chapter of the book, he says that he put the fear of fire on him.
Yeah.
In this one, he says, that he wasn't gentle with him.
It says that he endures long speech with him. So I wonder. I mean, that's a little different than sort of a description of him being tortured, but it's a question. And Gollum, he also gets tortured in Mordor, so he's really going through it.
Yeah, poor Gollum.
But,
should we call him Smeagol instead of Gollum?
Smeagol,
Gollum's a little derogatory.
Yeah, probably.
So I mean, he's saying like, yeah, I mean, I had to endure a long talk with him, but yeah, it says he was tamed by lack of drink and food. I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah, they withhold food.
Yeah, so they do torture the poor little guy, but Gandalf is like, it's okay. I mean, talk about like, I mean, I don't know. This is definitely a weakness because maybe we're just reading this in post 9/11, post War on Terror lens, but I think when you talk about ends justifying the means and the ends never justifying the means, I think like torture is a line that we've drawn in the sand as modern people now, saying that he put the fear of fire on him or that he denied him food and drink, but it wasn't without profit is what he says, because he gets proofs, and he finds out that his years have been expanded, and it confirms in his mind that this is one of the rings of power, and one of the great rings. And since the only unaccounted for great ring is the ring, that it must be the ring. But I think it's interesting. He says, and if that is not proof enough, Galdor, there is the other test that I spoke of. So Gandalf's getting a little sassy with Galdor. He's like, all right, Galdor, you don't believe me? Like, someone would have said that everything that you've heard up to this point might be enough, but I'm going to tell you some more. And he's like, oh, and by the way, Galdor, yeah, I got more. All right. Yeah. Because I threw it in the fire.
Right.
And I read the writing on it. So if that's not enough for you, Galdor, then I don't know what else to say. I think like Galdor's getting a little bit too much cheek given his way in this.
What he deserves.
Yeah.
Right. First time he's hearing a lot of this story. He reads, or he says the words in the Black Speech.
In the Black Speech. Osnaj Dimbaduk.
A shadow seemed to pass over the high sun, and the porch for a moment grew dark. All trembled, and the elves cover their ears.
Yeah.
It like hurts them to hear.
It hurts them to even hear it, yeah.
Elrond says,
never before has any voice.
Yeah, Elrond says, never before has any voice dared to utter words of that tongue in Imladris. Gandalf is like, well, deal with it, because that's how serious this is.
I don't beg your pardon.
Yeah. And of course, what he's just said is one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness, bind them.
And so that's the final proof. I mean, it's what he read in the scroll in Gondor that Isildur said was written on the ring. So he gets the last proof that he needed. And in chapter 2, when we see this happening in real time, Gandalf is like, hey, I'm certain at this point that this is the ring of power, the one ring to rule them all, because of like the information that I got from Bilbo and just the stirrings of my heart. I know for sure that this is this is the One Ring, but I'm going to do this as like the final test.
Mm-hmm.
And so, after he presents this to the council, he's just like, I mean,
what else do you need?
There's no other proof,
Yeah.
like this is the proof. And now really all that's left to answer is what to do about it. Like, we know for sure that this is the ring, but now what do we do? But before we get to that, we find out that Gollum has escaped.
Yeah, Gollum was imprisoned in Mirkwood. But Legolas, unfortunately, we find out the reason he's come is because Smeagol, who is now called Gollum, has escaped.
I think it's great that Legolas calls him Smeagol.
I do too. Smeagol, who is now called Gollum, has escaped.
I think that shows a lot of dignity in the Mirkwood elves that they refer to him as Smeagol, not Gollum.
So, Aragorn doesn't mince words. He says, "How came the folk of Thranduil to fail in their trust?" And Legolas is like, "Well, maybe we were a little too kind to him."
Yeah, over kindliness, he says.
Over kindliness.
Yeah. He's like, we couldn't stand to, keep him from, going out like in experiencing nature and, like basically he's like, we're not going to do what Gandalf did to him.
Yeah, look, he liked to climb the trees. He wanted some fresh air, and
the poor little guy, he'd been through a lot. He'd been tortured.
Right.
He's terrible to look at, but we're not going to like deny him like simple pleasures. And I love Glowin's response. He's like, "You were less tender to me."
We get it because they were imprisoned by the Mirkwood elves, and they have to escape in beer barrels, right?
Wine barrels.
Wine barrels. Yeah, that Bilbo has to smuggle them out of there.
The good thief. But it's interesting. I think this sets up the specialness of the relationship of Legolas and Gimli. Mm-hmm. And we'll see as we read a little further, they don't start out as fast friends. They are not fast friends.
No.
They don't really become friends until maybe I would say like the flight to save Merry and Pippin is like when they start to actually be kind of kind to each other.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But in the beginning, they're especially not. They're very snippy with each other. And Gandalf is like, hey, like, if we're going to bring up all the baggage between elves and dwarves, like, we'll be here way past lunch. So, like, let's just like put that behind. And Glowin really, I think very kindly just bows and lets it go. Yeah, we find out that Gollum, the reason why he escaped is because he went up a tree and refused to come down. That struck me as a little too close to my own children's willfulness.
Yeah, right. He refused to come down, and they didn't. The guards, they weren't going to climb up after him
because he's like hanging by his feet, right?
Yeah, apparently, Smeagol can hang from his feet from a tree, and
so I guess like whenever his arms got tired, he'd switch to his feet.
Yeah, but orcs attack while he's up there, and
in a coordinated attack, which he's not sure how this could happen, but he's like, they're crafty and cunning. Gollum is cunning, and the enemy is cunning, and it seems like there was some sort of coordination where orcs came and he was able to escape with them.
But Gandalf tells us, well, he says he's gone, and we don't have time to be looking for Gollum.
No.
But he may play a part yet that neither he nor Sauron have foreseen.
Yeah, and that's wisdom, and right. It's not just foreshadowing. It's not just a literary device. I think there's a lesson in that runs all through Lord of the Rings, that if there's somebody that you have counted out and said that they are too bad to do any earthly good, that essentially God will surprise you, and right. and how people who have done bad things can be used to ultimately bring about a good end. Mm-hmm. He's saying don't don't count him out. And that's a lesson that he said consistently. Like, Gollum is not fully irredeemable. And in the last pages of the story, we find out that, in fact, the entire quest would have failed if not for the mercy and pity that was shown to Smeagol, whether it be by Gandalf or Legolas or Frodo or Sam or whoever.
I think that comes from, I mean, it plays into a deeper cosmological truth about the creation of existence, which is that even though Morgoth sings a discordant sort of harmony or not harmony, but
disharmony,
a discord into the song of creation, it still remains part of the song of creation, which because it's sung by God is good.
Yeah.
And so Gandalf understands that even in these particular moments with, a creature like Smeagol, it may bear out that discordant note becomes part of the goodness of the story.
Yeah.
Galdor keeps the plot going for us and asks, what about Saruman? What's going on with him?
So Gandalf is keeping his like full cheek, and he's like, hey, and by the way, Galdor, like, I know you wanted to like call me out in front of this council. I haven't forgotten about you, Galdor. Guess what else, Galdor?
Poor Galdor.
What about Saruman? You wanted to know? All right, well, yeah, let me tell you what that sucker did to me.
Right.
Galdor. Gandalf says, at the end of June, I was in the Shire, but a cloud of anxiety was in my mind, and I rode to the southern borders of the little land, for I had a foreboding of some danger still hidden from me, but drawing near. Their messages reached me, telling me of the war and the defeat in Gondor, and when I heard of the Black Shadow, a chill smote my heart. So that answers a question that we had back in chapter 2, which is like, he says he has to go south because he's received some news, and we were like, all right, who's he receiving news from here? Like, is it Aragorn? Like, and what was the news that made him want to go and seek Saruman's help? It seems like he just had like a feeling, like a bad feeling. Mm-hmm. And he goes south just to kind of check things out. So it seems like he didn't really receive news so much as he had a bad feeling. And while he's out seeking the news, he runs into our guy Radagast, who is this the only appearance of Radagast in the entire
I think so.
story?
He might get mentioned later, but I'm pretty sure this is it.
It's definitely the only lines that he gets. So the only lines of dialogue that Radagast has are through the recollection of Gandalf in the Council of Elrond. He says that he's been looking for Gandalf. He says, I knew that you might be found in a wild region with the uncouth name of Shire, that's Tolkien humor at its height.
Yeah, later on, yes, Gandalf says the Shire.
Yeah, he corrects him. He's like, no, it's not Shire, it's the Shire.
It's Radagast who tells Gandalf that the Nazgul are abroad and that they've crossed the river and are moving westwards.
They've taken the guise of riders in black.
And Gandalf says, who told you and who sent you? Radagast tells him, Saruman sent me, Saruman the White. And he told me to say that he's going to need you, so you better get down there.
Yeah, you're being summoned.
And still Gandalf is hopeful that Saruman is on his side. I don't think he really suspects Saruman yet.
I think he has some like discomfort about Saruman. I think he has been like a little bit withholding about the information that he's seeking. Like, he doesn't tell him that he's going to Gondor to read up on the ring. I think there's a distrust that's there, even though I don't think he begins to dream that he would join forces with Sauron.
Right.
I think he doesn't quite trust his council anymore. But there's a really subtle thing here, which is that Radagast is like, you must go there now. And he says, I myself shall turn back at once. And he starts to leave. And Gandalf is like, wait, hold up. Send out messages to all the beasts and the birds that are your friends. Tell them to bring news of anything that bears on this matter to Sauron and Gandalf. Let messages be sent to Orthanc. And Radagast agrees, and then he runs off with his horse. But if he hadn't told Radagast to do that, he never would have been saved from Orthanc.
Yeah.
Like, the eagle doesn't come because, Gandalf whispered to a moth. The eagle comes because Radagast told him to be looking for, black riders. And he comes assuming that he's going to bring news to Sauron, but instead he rescues Gandalf.
Mm-hmm. So he goes to Isengard. We get a description, of course, where is Isengard? What does it look like? It's this huge tower that doesn't really even look like a work of craft. It looks like almost like a natural obelisk or something coming out of the earth, surrounded by the circle of Isengard, a wall with one gate.
Yeah.
And he starts to feel as he goes through the arch, he's like,
something's off here.
Something's wrong. He doesn't quite know why. And then he sees Saruman. Saruman's got a ring on his finger. What's that about? Why do you have a ring on your finger?
Yeah, so he rolls up to Orthanc, and Saruman has a ring on his finger. Like, what do you make of that? And he calls himself Ring Maker at one point, doesn't he?
Yeah, Ring Maker. He's Mordor pilled,
Yeah.
He's been sort of infested by, he's like studied too much the ways of the enemy.
Yeah.
And now he thinks that he can take that power onto himself. So maybe this ring has some power in it.
Yeah, even from afar, it's like kind of the idea of it has tainted him.
Right. It's not just an affectation. He's got this thing on because he's kind of molding himself in the same image as Sauron. He's such a little wiener to Gandalf. Gandalf's like, "Hey, I've come from your aid, Saruman the White." And he's like, "Have you indeed, Gandalf the Grey?" He scowled.
White, he sneers. White serves as the beginning. White cloth may be dyed. The white page may be overwritten, and the white light can be broken.
And Gandalf notices that he doesn't just have white on. He's got on this like rainbow colored. He's like iridescent or something.
Yeah, like it changes as he moves. It's like those like car body paints that change color based on which direction you look at it from. But he kind of throws down to them. He's like, yeah, if the white light can be broken, it's no longer white. And he says, and he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. And it seems like later on, the other perspective that we get about Saruman, well, we get it from a couple other people. Like, we see his influence in Rohan later, but it seems like the person that's most disappointed in Saruman is Treebeard.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how he used to be good, and he calls him young Saruman at one point. Like he's kind of seen him. He's like, neighbors. And he's like, he's being a bad neighbor. Like he's left the path of wisdom.
It's that like breaking that relationship that enrages Treebeard so much.
Yeah.
Something about the relationship they had. And Saruman falling away from that is
disappointing. And he's like, he's not only is he a bad neighbor, he's like, he's disappointed in him because he is like getting too big for his britches.
Yeah, Saruman has begun to see everyone around him, including people who are of similar power to him, as fools. He thinks Radagast a fool. He thinks that Gandalf is a fool, and he thinks that all of Gandalf's friends are fools. They're all just morons. And he's the only one with any of the answers.
And there's something that Treebeard says at one point. He says that he wanted to become a power,
right?
Like that it's almost like he is jealous of the Valar themselves, and he recognizes that he's not as powerful as one of the Valar, and he is lustful for that type of control. And so I think that's why he like puts why he like tries to, he studies the ring lore, and then he tries to become a ring bearer himself. It seems like he's kind of like dabbling in the art of, like, he's studying it so that he can make a ring for himself.
Yeah.
And that's why he has a ring on his finger when Gandalf comes to him. But he's like, no, this whole me making a ring for myself thing maybe didn't work out, so I'm going to try to get the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And he launches into this kind of like fascistic, like kind of almost like it sounds like a speech from like straight from like the mouth of Hitler. And I know it's not a commentary on Hitler, but it's hard not to. There's a few points where in Lord of the Rings where you read it and you're like, it's really hard to buy that the rise of fascism in Europe is not playing into Tolkien's writing. And I think this speech is one that really sticks out to me.
Yeah.
He says, a new power is rising. Against it, the old allies and policies will no longer avail us at all. Even just the word policies has like kind of like a modern political ring to it, doesn't it? There's no hope left in the elves or dying Numenor. This then is the one choice before you, before us. We may join with that power. It would be wise, Gandalf. There is hope that way. Its victory is at hand, and there will be rich reward for those that aided it. As the power grows, its proved friends will also grow, and the wise, such as you and I, may with patience come at last to direct its courses and to control it. Mm-hmm. We can bide our time. We can keep our thoughts in our hearts, deploring maybe evils done by the way, but approving the high and ultimate purpose. Knowledge, rule, order, all the things that we have so far striven in vain to accomplish, hindered rather than helped by our weak and idle friends. There would not be any real change in our designs, only in our means. That might be as close as we get to like a real distillation of like Tolkien's philosophy of what evil is.
Mm-hmm. And I think it is in such stark contrast to the way that Gandalf comports himself and the people that he associates with, whether they be hobbits or, barleymen or people who appear to be weaker, people like Aragorn who appear to be weak or dirty or whatever. It's those people who appear foolish, who actually have a deeper wisdom, because of the way that they don't treat ends as ultimate significance. The way they comport themselves is in a way that sees each person in their good and having a role to play, whether they're Smeagol or Aragorn.
But like control is not the ultimate end of the wise,
right?
And he's sort of putting that in Gandalf's mouth, where he's like rule, order, knowledge, like all these things that we've striven for. And I'm sure that Gandalf's listening to that and thinking like, that's not what I've striven for, man. Like, no. Like I've not striven to rule over people. Like, what are you talking about? And Gandalf's response is really striking. I think he says, I have heard speeches of this kind before, but only in the mouths of emissaries sent from Mordor to deceive the ignorant. I cannot think that you brought me so far only to weary my ears.
Yeah, I've heard it before, buddy.
Yeah.
I came all this way to hear a speech I've heard before. I've come all this way for just lies and deception, essentially.
And then Saruman just kind of lets it all fly. I mean, he's like, I have a reason to believe, because of the many spies that I have in my service, that you know where this precious thing now lies.
Yeah. And
it says that like there's lust in his eyes that he can't hold back anymore, that he like really just shows his true self.
It's funny that they address each other by name so much.
Gandalf the Grey.
Gandalf the Grey. And why not Gandalf? And then again, Gandalf says, Saruman, only one head at a time can wield the one, and you know that well. So don't trouble to say we.
Yeah.
He's really trying to get his attention, or they're each trying to get each other's attention by, I think, saying each other's names so much, and maybe there's some power in that or something. That reminds me, did you have a impression you wanted to give us?
I thought we'd have like a little bit of a more natural segue into my little show and tell.
I don't know.
So here's the line. Okay.
It
says, I did not expect you to show wisdom, but I gave you the chance of aiding me willingly, and so saving yourself much trouble and pain. The third choice is to stay here until the end. So one of the only impressions that I'm able to do is the sounds that the wizards make in the fight in Isengard in the Lord of the Rings movies and in the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
So here we go. You have chosen the way of pain. Ah!
Yeah, this back and forth is a little bit different than that wizards.
The wizards duel. I don't know what you call it. The battle of the wizards. So he's up on top of Orthanc where Saruman goes to see the stars back in the days before he turned evil. And he's able to see that there are orcs and wolves in Isengard, and that the area surrounding Isengard has been pocked with destruction and kind of wanton burning and hacking. And he knows for sure that Saruman has just completely turned and betrayed them.
Frodo says, I saw you.
Yeah. And Gandalf's like, what?
In that dream. You were walking back and forth and the moon shone in your hair. And that's how we find out. Well, first of all, Gandalf is, careful to say, I don't think Radagast had fallen. Otherwise, I wouldn't have believed him. Radagast thought he was doing the right thing. And there's, treachery on Saruman's part. And then we hear that Radagast actually did what he told Gandalf would do.
Yeah.
And sent word, and the eagles of the mountains went far and wide and saw all these things, and they sent a messenger to bring these tidings.
The swiftest of the great eagles, Gwaihir the Wind Lord. He came unlooked for to Orthanc and found me standing on the pinnacle.
That's the important phrase. He came unlooked for to Orthanc.
Yeah. Yeah.
That the fact that, Saruman doesn't have a Air Force. But if Saruman did have an Air Force, it probably wouldn't be that easy for even Gwaihir, the Wind Lord, to make his way to Isengard.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that he can come unlooked for that allows him to come so easily to Gandalf's aid.
Yeah. Saruman hasn't told Radagast to send out his beasts and birds.
No.
That was Gandalf's intuition. He's like, hey, this is what you're good at.
Exactly. What assets does this person have, and how can I use them to the benefit of exactly?
But not even like, how can I use other people's assets? It's more like Gandalf's strength is that he inspires people to use their own gifts for the good.
Right. That's right.
And so it's such a an insight. There's Saruman thinks that Radagast is a fool.
Right.
Gandalf thinks that Radagast has talents and gifts. And it's because of that blindness where Saruman thinks that he is great and that he is knowledgeable. Gandalf is humble enough to know other people have gifts and talents too. They're not just pawns to be used. And that's what saves Gandalf's skin.
Right.
Absolutely. If he hadn't recognized what Radagast was good at and allowed him to kind of practice his own freedom, Gandalf would have been doomed. He'd still be up on top of Orthanc,
It's funny that when Gandalf asks Radagast to go talk to the beasts and birds, Radagast is like, cool, and he runs quick as fast as he can.
Yeah.
But when Gandalf finds Radagast, he's sitting just sort of like on a bench.
Is that right?
I think it says, yeah, it says that I came upon a traveler sitting on a bank beside the road with his grazing horse beside him. It was Radagast the Brown. So he's been given this mission from Saruman.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, I guess I'll do it. But he's like, sort of, if Saruman had said, tell your beasts and birds to look for Gandalf.
Yeah.
But he can't see that. He can't see that as a talent or a power that Radagast has. But Gandalf sees it immediately. Yeah. I mean, Gandalf knows who this guy is and what he can do.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good insight.
So, yeah, I think that's so beautiful, the way that Gandalf, because Gandalf befriends people.
Yeah.
And has like a genuine interest in them. And the only thing that Saruman cares about at this point is gaining power like Sauron has.
Yeah.
And so he can't see those things. Okay, so Sauron and Saruman, or Gandalf and Saruman, have had their showdown.
Yeah.
And Gandalf gets saved by Gwaihir off the pinnacle of Horthanc.
And he asked him, like, how far can you bear me?
And he's like, well, I didn't come to bear a burden, I came to bear news.
Yeah, and he's like, I can bear you a long way, but not forever.
I couldn't take you, for instance, to Mount Doom.
For example, were I 1,000 miles away from Mount Doom in the Shire, I couldn't take you and your little buddy and just fly you straight to Mordor.
Yeah, and I certainly couldn't do it if there were 9 Nazgul waiting for me either.
Yeah, with winged steeds. All right.
Exactly.
And by the way, there are orcs all around Mount Doom, and guess what they got? Bows and arrows. And guess what? Eagles can be shot with bows and arrows. They're not impervious to bows and arrows.
Right.
So, like, it's such a tired thing for people to be like, oh. Anytime someone finds out that I'm really into Lord of the Rings, what do they ask me?
Why don't they just fly to Mordor?
Oh, why don't they just take the eagles to Mordor? And I'm like, okay, first of all, get an original joke. Okay?
Yeah.
That's first of all.
Right.
Second of all, Tolkien already uses that plot device probably too many times.
Yeah, he does. It's true.
Like, just think about how many times eagles have saved the day in the stories of Tolkien. It's a lot. Okay? Like, it would just be a bad, like, he already relies on this technique too many times, I think.
Anyway, he goes to Rohan.
He goes to Rohan, and by the way, he hears like a little rumor from Gwaihir that the people of Rohan are paying tribute to the Dark Lord. Boromir stands up and
Excuse me, that's a lie.
That's not true. And I mean, he is in the know, and Aragorn says, like, hey, yeah, I mean, like, it wasn't the case when I was there, but if Saruman has already fallen, then we don't know where the people of Rohan are now. And, like, it's been a long time since you've been there. Things may not be the way they were when you left. But if you think about it, I was thinking about this just this morning, actually. The fact that Saruman has been working through Wormtongue to weaken Theoden shows that, I mean, the people of Rohan, they haven't broken trust. They haven't turned cloak the same way that Saruman has, but they are diminished. I mean, they're not on top of their game. Saruman has infiltrated them through Wormtongue. And so they may not be giving horses to the enemy, but maybe they're not as, on top of things as they would be. Maybe it's easier for their black horses to be stolen now because Theoden's eyes aren't on the ball. And he's dropped off by Gwaihir, and he takes Shadowfax. We were joking earlier that the horniest that Lord of the Rings gets is Bombadil and what is it? Lady
Galadriel?
Goldberry.
Goldberry, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the horniest Lord of the Rings gets is Bombadil and Goldberry. Second horniest Lord of the Rings gets is Gimli asking for Galadriel's hair. Mm-hmm. Third horniest that Lord of the Rings gets is Gandalf talking about this horse.
He's Gandalf got it bad for Shadowfax.
Gandalf is very into Shadowfax.
Yeah, you got to get a load of this horse. Let me tell you what.
It's like, just wait till I tell you about this horse.
The flanks on this horse are shimmering. Let me tell you.
Nobody had mounted him before.
I tamed him and I mounted him, and he bore me swiftly to my goal. Oh no. Oh no.
Oh.
Gandalf the Horse Whisperer, let me tell you what.
Oh.
All right.
Never have I had need of such haste. Oh. Shadowfax takes him a long way, though. He takes him
all the way. Okay, so Shadowfax, the greatest horse in the world,
bore him speedily to the Shire.
Yes.
When Frodo was on the Barrow Downs. Though I set out from Rohan only when he set out from Hobbiton.
So it kind of 5 days.
Like, yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah, because we said 5 days from leaving Hobbiton to getting to the Barrow Downs, right? So that means he rode for 5 days all the way up from Rohan up to. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, it takes
galloping.
He says, I came to Hobbiton and Frodo had gone, but I had words with old Gamgee. I love that. He's talking to Sam's dad. Many words and few to the point. So he's like, he was talking a little too much. I needed to get moving. He had much to say about the shortcomings of the new owners of the Bag End. So
SBs.
The SBs work their way into the story, even at the Council of Elrond, and never tracked that. He says, I can't abide changes, not at my time of life, and least of all changes for the worst. That's pretty great.
I love it.
I'm going to say that next time my kids misbehave.
Changes for the worst, he repeated many times.
Then he came to Buckland, found it in an uproar. Says everybody was like ants that have been stirred by a stick. Such an interesting image. He found a piece of Frodo's cloak and assumed that he was dead. He says, I came to the house at Crick Hollow, and it was broken open and empty, but on the threshold there lay a cloak that had been Frodo's. Then for a while hope left me, and I did not wait to gather news, or I might have been comforted. But I rode on the trail of the riders. And he gets to Butterbur, finds out that they left with Aragorn. Butterbur's apology to Gandalf is really funny. Mm-hmm. He says, I tried to talk them out of it, but they wouldn't listen. They were willful, if you follow me.
Ass, fool, thrice worthy and beloved Barlaman, said I. It's the best news I have since midsummer. It's worth a gold piece at least. May your bier be laid under an enchantment of a surpassing excellence for 7 years, said I. Now I can take a night's rest.
He takes a night's rest, but as he's taking the night's rest, the rest of the Nazgul blow their way through Bree, and he this is where he says goodbye to Shadowfax, I guess, because the Shadowfax can't walk in the brambles.
Well, he gets himself to Weathertop, and I think it's interesting that they won't attack him when the sun is up. He says, they drew away from me, so they felt the coming of my anger and dared not face it while the sun was in the sky. And yeah, he has to say goodbye to Shadowfax because Shadowfax can't. I guess he would have been better off with like a mule or something because
he can't ride among the rocks.
Yeah, ride among the rocks. And eventually he ends up in Rivendell, only 3 days before the ring. So everyone's a little shocked by this news regarding Saruman.
Yeah.
And Elrond says that it's perilous to study too deeply the arts of the enemy for good or for evil.
Yeah. That's what a lot of people warned me about when I went to college in the Northeast.
Yeah.
They said, don't go getting too deep in that book learning. You know, I mean, it can cause all kinds of problems.
One thing leads to another, and you're doing a podcast on Lord of the Rings.
Here we finally get to sort of the climax of the council. I think you pretty accurately described it as a funnel.
Yeah.
And you start out with all these loose pieces, all these possibilities, and all these proofs that need to be established to show that it is the ring. And now we're left with the real question. What do you do?
What do we actually do with it? Right.
All these options have been, or all these proofs and everything else have been given, and now all that's left to do is to say, like, what are the options? So let's just kind of go through some of the options. One option that they say is like, why don't we just give it to Bombadil? Seems like he wasn't bothered by the ring. Didn't seem like the ring had any control over him. In fact, it seemed like he had some control over the ring itself. Why don't we give it to him? And like, what's your understanding of like why Bombadil would be a bad keeper of the ring?
Because it's not serious to him. It's not really part of his like world in a way. And yeah, the ring has no power over him. And Gandalf says because he's his own master, but he can't alter the ring. He can't break it. He can't break its power over other people. Yeah. And he would put it down somewhere and forget about it. Galdor says power to defy the enemy is not in him unless such power is in the earth itself.
Yeah, that's great.
Which maybe comports with something my friend Nick said about Bombadil, which is, potentially Bombadil's calling is to kind of translate the Song of Creation, like the nature part of the Song of Creation, into the world.
Yeah.
He's there to sort of like manage that or something. Yeah. Which maybe explains his ability to, keep the rain off of him and things like that. And then here we have this interesting line that if the power is in the earth itself, like in nature itself, perhaps that would give him this power to defy the enemy. But that's not how the earth works, and it's not how Bombadil works. So
yeah,
he just doesn't have the same kind of strength that they need.
No, and like, I mean, he would be an unsafe holder of it because he might just like forget that he has it or throw it away or not treat it with the proper respect. But Glorfindel says, I think really convincingly, he's like, okay, even if we decided to have Bombadil be the keeper or protector of the ring, there's no way that we could get it to him without the enemy knowing. Right. And so eventually all the forces of evil would march to Bombadil and he would be like the last one standing essentially. And then the ring would be taken and all would be lost. Right. It's the same reason why Elrond says essentially like we can't just keep the ring in Imladris, Rivendell, because if we did, then eventually, Gondor would fall, and then Rohan would fall, and then they'd march over the mountains, and then they'd come to Rivendell, and then everything would be lost eventually too. So can't go to Bombadil, can't stay in Rivendell, and then they say, okay, well, what if we just throw it into the sea?
Right.
And Gandalf is like, hey, seas, like maps change over time. And all you'd be doing is just punting it down to a new generation to have to take care of this thing. And then they're like, well, why don't we just take it over to the Valar? So what's your understanding of why the Valar wouldn't take it?
Well, he says because it belongs to Middle-earth.
Yeah.
They don't see it as part of their realm.
No.
It's for Middle-earth to deal with. Middle-earth is where it was created.
Yeah.
And he says, frankly, too often the elves have fled that way.
Yeah.
He sees it as a true sign of like the weakness of the elves that they continue just to leave.
They can't handle their own business.
Yeah, they can't handle it, and just going that way is not the answer. The answer is to do something here.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've been gathered here, as he says at the beginning of the chapter, the fact we've been gathered here, we're appointed this task.
Yeah. We've been chosen.
Yeah, we've been chosen, and we got to live up to the fact that we've been called to this work.
And it's terrible, and nobody here wants it to have happened, except for maybe Boromir, who's like,
Yeah.
Why don't we just use it as a weapon, man?
He's kind of into it. But I think there's a way in which Elrond is saying we can't just depend on God.
No.
Or the gods to deal with this for us.
No.
We have to deal with it. Like, thoughts and prayers are not enough, and to take it across the sea is like that. It's just like, well, yeah, I mean, this is hard, but like, won't God take care of it if God really cares? And it's like, God is taking care of it. He brought us here, we're the ones who are supposed to deal with this.
Well, I mean, the other practical thing, and this isn't said exactly, I mean, it's like, it's really hinted at, but it gets into it in the Silmarillion. There was a time that somebody got on a ship and went to Valinor and asked the powers, the Valar, to come over and handle business on Middle Earth. You know when that was? Elrond's dad, Arundel,
right.
got on a ship, and using one of the Silmarils, he burst through the clouds and went against the ban of a mortal coming to the land of the Valinor. And he pleads with the Valar to overthrow Morgoth. And you know what happens? They say sure. They go over and they overthrow Melkor, Sauron's boss. But guess what? It destroyed.
Yeah, half the world gets covered in the ocean, right? Like,
yeah. Like,
yeah.
it was such a tumultuous battle that all of Beleriand, which is like, there was a bunch of stuff like west of the Shire that's now just all underwater.
Right.
It like broke the world. And so it's not something you don't want to go to ask the Valar for help unless you have absolutely no other choice.
Right.
And Elrond is like, it may not seem like there's much hope, but we are not without hope.
Yeah.
Like, and as long as we are able, we have to assume that the Valar have given us what we need to do this this task. And the fact that there's all the signs and visions that are being given to Boromir and to Frodo and other people shows that they do have the backing of the Valar. You know, the Valar are giving them strength and guidance, and that's just about as much help from the Valar as you want to get.
Yeah, you don't want to call down the vengeance of whatever upon the whatever, the thing. Like,
No,
that's not. Even though that seems like a sort of easier road to take or something, like let somebody more powerful than me come and take care of it.
Yeah.
It ends up with unforeseen consequences. You're really going to be in for it when something as powerful as a god shows up in the world.
Yeah. There's a sense you don't want to be in the presence of something this powerful, because it would just destroy you. But all of that to say, we can't wield it as a weapon against Sauron. We can't hide it with Bombadil. We can't hide it in the sea. We can't leave it in Rivendell. We can't unmake it with any powers that we have. So the only thing that's left for us to do is to take it to Mordor and throw it in the fire that it was made in, and unmake it. And that's the bit that we started with today. Now, at this last, we must take a hard road, a road unforeseen. There lies our hope, if hope it be. To walk into peril, to Mordor, we must send the ring to the fire. He says, if any of the wise should with this ring overthrow the Lord of Mordor using his own arts, he would then set himself on Sauron's throne, and yet another dark lord would appear. And that is another reason why the ring should be destroyed. As long as it is in the world, it will be a danger even to the wise. For nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was not so. I fear to take the ring to hide it. I will not take the ring to wield it.
Aristor chimes in. I mean, we're coming closer and closer. We're coming closer and closer to to resolving that the ring has to be destroyed, and the only place it can be destroyed is in the fires of Mount Doom.
Yeah.
And Aristor says, "What strength have we for finding of the fire in which it was made? That is the path of despair, of folly, I would say, if the long wisdom of Elrond did not forbid me." And Gandalf says, despair and folly is what Gandalf sort of trades in, or at least in like what appears to be foolishness.
Right.
So he says, "Despair or folly," says Gandalf. "It is not despair, for despair is only those who see the end beyond all doubt."
Right.
And then he says, "Let folly be our cloak, a veil before the eyes of the enemy." Because he only understands power and force.
Yeah.
But if we do something unexpected, and not even unexpected, but seemingly foolish, which is to like take this ring as close as possible to Sauron,
right?
He may not, understand what we're trying to do,
right?
And why would anybody choose not to use the power of the ring? That's what Sauron's really depending on.
It doesn't even occur to him that someone would destroy it.
No. And Bilbo is hungry for lunch.
And he's like, "Look,
I'll take it."
Look, it's clear what everybody's saying. This is Bilbo's mess. Bilbo needs to clean it up. So
exactly.
If we could just get going to lunch now, then I'll just say that I'll do it. And I love that Boromir laughs, but then he looks and he realizes that nobody else is laughing.
He's like, "Oh, this is serious. People take this little hobbit seriously."
Yeah. And it's very gently said to Bilbo that it's not his burden to bear anymore.
Yeah, you're a little old and for this, and you've had your time with the ring. It's passed to someone else. And again, he says, "Elves may thrive on speech alone, and dwarves endure great weariness. But I am only an old hobbit, and I miss my meal at noon." Can you think of some names now of who's going to bear this thing to Mordor?
Like guys,
or let's put it off till dinner.
Yeah, but they say no.
This is where that silence comes.
Yeah,
no one answers. The noon bell rang and no one spoke. And now we get Frodo. Frodo glanced at all the faces. They weren't turned to him. They all just are looking down. It says a great dread fell on Frodo.
Yeah, I was just about to read that same thing. An overwhelming longing to rest and to remain at peace by Bilbo's side in Rivendell filled his heart. At last, with an effort, he spoke and wondered to hear his own words, as if some other will was using his small voice. "I will take the ring, though I do not know the way."
I love this, though, that Elrond says, "I think this task is appointed for you, Frodo."
Yeah.
No, and I think there's more than one person in the room who knows that Frodo has to come to this on his own.
Yeah.
Aragorn has already said it's yours to keep for a little while. It's not mine to hold.
Yeah.
But no one can say, like, "Why don't you take it, Frodo?" He has to come to it himself, which is why that silence is so important.
Yeah.
There's like a contemplative moment where it like, Frodo has to realize what his role is and step into it willingly.
Yeah.
So Elrond says, "I think the task has been appointed to you. And then if you don't find a way, no one will." And then he says, "This is the hour of the Shire folk."
Yeah.
To shake the towers and councils of the great. God, come on. Who of all the wise could have foreseen it? Or if they are wise, why should they expect to know it until the hour has struck?
He says, "It is a heavy burden, so heavy that none could lay it on another. I do not lay it on you, but if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right. And though all the mighty elf friends of old, Hador and Hurin and Turin and Baron himself were assembled together, your seat would be among them."
God, come on. If that doesn't charge you up, like, I don't want to like run through. I like want to run through a door. You know what I mean? And then Sam can't help himself. This is the end. Sam can't help himself. He jumps up from the corridor where he'd been quietly sitting on the floor and says, "You won't send him off alone, surely, master." And Elrond says, with a smile. They're always smiling at the hobbits. They just love these little guys.
Just love these little guys.
He says, "You at least shall go with him. It's hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he's been summoned to a secret council and you are not." Nice pickle we've landed on ourselves, Mr. Frodo. It's the end of the story, end of the chapter. Ends with Sam.
We did it. We made our way through the Council of Elrond.
Somehow. It was a heavy burden, but someone had to, someone had to get through it.
Well, thanks so much for reading along with us in Book 2, Chapter 2, The Council of Elrond. Next week, the ring goes south, baby.
Oh, yeah.
The tone is about to change yet again, all right? Like, this is when the story really starts. Like, your reward for reading up to this point is that we are about to hit a breakneck pace that will not let down until that ring makes its way into the fires of Mount Doom. Like, it is about to get hot in this story. So I hope you'll join us next week. We hope that you will like and subscribe on all the platforms. Follow us on Spotify. Follow us on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating and share this podcast with a Lord of the Rings friend in your life. If we've made any mistakes, if we've misspoken, if there's something you'd like to have more information on, if there's something you'd like to give us your own take on, you can send us an email at info@waywardwizards.com or go to waywardwizards.com to learn more about the project.
And until next week, remember, despair is only for those who see the end beyond all doubt.
We'll see you next week.